Thank you. Salut Nicolas.
Salut
Eric, welcome.
Right, thank you very much, Loïc and Geraldine, and good morning, everybody. So we are here to talk about how governments can stimulate entrepreneurship. And we have Nicolas Princen, sorry, I will get it right, sorry, and Eric van der Kleij, who are responsible for stimulating entrepreneurship in both France and England. And I think we've got a lot to talk about. And you may say, well, what can governments actually do? Can't you just, like, get out of the way? I think when I first started my companies, I didn't really perceive what the government can do. But now that I've funded 40 companies and we employ thousands of people across dozens of countries, I think I now do have an understanding of what governments can do to stimulate entrepreneurship. And I also know that it's really important. 7% of the economies now are stimulated by high-tech entrepreneurship, the sorts of companies that are here today, and that is growing very, very quickly. And more than half of the jobs that have been created in, I think, across Europe, and certainly in the UK, are created from these fast-growth companies that are here today. And that's important. And it's even more important when you take into consideration that 25% of all of the growth in the economies comes from the high-tech companies, such as those that are being created here today and judged later on too. So we know it's vital, and we know it's really important because the economies, which again you sort of think it's very important, but just the internet economy in both France and the UK are larger than the transport and utility and the communications industries, and they're growing really, really fast. So, but what can you do to make them grow faster? And how do we stop people like Loïc and Jeff Clavier going back over to other places? What do we do here to make it attractive, to make this the best place in the world for entrepreneurship and also get our economies back on track? So what's going to happen is we're going to start out with Nicolas, and he is going to talk for a few minutes, let's say 4 minutes. And if he goes over, I'm going to start gesticulating wildly. I don't know if I'm going to do what Loïc just did, but I'll start getting violent after 5 minutes. And then Eric is going to talk, and then we're going to have a short conversation about some of the other things. So please join me in welcoming Nicolas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, listen, looking at the audience this morning, I think the main thing Paris delivers is awesome parties. So to attract people like Loïc and Jeff, I think that's the best way to go. Now, more seriously, those figures you mentioned are really interesting. And in the case of France, the last study we have shows that the internet economy represents almost 6% of total GDP. Yeah. But if you look at the actual digitalization of the whole GDP and the whole economy, we're talking about 80% of value in this country. So it's not only the 6%, it's the impact of the 6% on the rest. Yep. And so it's huge. I think...
So we know why you're giving us good parties.
Exactly. So France these last years has launched an extremely competitive policy with regards to innovation and to bring down the barrier to entrepreneurship. So there's a series of elements I can describe. Number one, a very aggressive tax system with tax cuts for startups. Basically, when you build a startup in France, you pay almost no taxes for the first 4 years, and then you just start paying taxes progressively to the 8th year. But the main thing is we do everything for startups to grow as easily as possible and to scale up, as we'll discuss probably.
Yep.
The number two thing is that we have huge tax cuts for innovation. So in France, whenever you invest in R&D, basically, if you pay 2 engineers, you get a third one for free. That's called the Crédit Impôt Recherche, and it's extremely effective. And I think it makes France the most competitive country in terms of tax cuts for research and development. The second thing we did for the past 3 years is huge investment. Investment in infrastructure, almost 4.3 billion euros. But also in services to push production, but also consumption, and have a market that's ready to consume the products delivered in the market by our companies. The third thing, I think, and probably most important, is totally unleash the potential of our talent. So notably, university reform in this country has been huge. Before, universities were centralized. Now, every single university is free to do whatever whatever they want. So basically, they can do whatever they want with their budget, and they can adapt to whatever deal they want to have with other companies. So there's a huge opportunity here to work with French universities who, as you know, especially in Silicon Valley, deliver some of the best talent in the world. And Eric Schmidt the other day said that we had one of the best educational systems in the world. That's something you can leverage. The last thing, I think, is a whole new conception of what government has to do to deliver innovation. And I think we share the kind of thinking on this. We now see government as part of the ecosystem. Not above the ecosystem, looking down at innovation and innovators, but part of that ecosystem at the same level, at the horizontal level. And I think what governments can do is facilitate, catalyze, enable innovation, and try to contribute positively to the ecosystem that can work without it, but that can work faster and better with it.
Yeah.
So most of my job, for example, is to try to work on the ecosystem to make sure that people who don't address and talk to each other usually actually start doing it. So universities and companies and startups and industrials. So that's the main point. And once we do that, we realize what everybody already knows, but to get there, it takes some time, that it all depends on entrepreneurs. What we have now, we didn't have 3 years ago, is a real ecosystem for a simple reason. It's that the pioneers of the IT and web world in this country succeeded. So it's just a bunch of guys. And what these guys do is that they invest back in the new generation, and that's enough to build an ecosystem. So, once you have government put the universities in there, right in the middle, that you have capital investment coming in, that means I have to stop. That's very subtle.
You've got 30
you
more
really
seconds.
have something going on. So that role of government as a catalyzer within the ecosystem is really something we've been working on, and I think we're going to share practice on this because, and that's my last thing, what we launched on Monday is a new dimension of what government can do for startups. We launched the Open Data Platform for French government. So data.gov.fr, that means that government isn't only helping, it's also a supplier of information and raw material for this industry, which is data. And I think we launched, and it's my friend Séverin Naudet who launched that, a record bunch of 350,000 sets of data for free. So whoever wants to build startup services from that can actually work on it. And what we try to do is build the ecosystem around that and put that data in the hands of those who can create services with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope you do something that we, a couple of weeks ago, we ran something called an appathon, which was a competition amongst the universities in the UK to create apps from government data that was just being released. And it was terrific. And what I think it also did is it tied the universities together with, with companies and tried to underline the impact that you could have as an entrepreneur by manipulating data and by allowing it to be visualized and brought to life. So
they built a program called Etalab Connection, so it's to accompany all the companies who want to work on that.
Yeah.
And we're working closely with the UK on these issues.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure that that's going to have a brilliant effect on your economy, so thanks for doing that. Right. Okay, so over to you, Eric. Who is also lovingly referred to in the UK as the entrepreneur in residence for the government. He's an entrepreneur that went over to the other side. We don't say the dark side, but we say the other side. So look forward to hearing what you have to say about how to create more entrepreneurs and make this the best place.
I still have a firm foot in the entrepreneur side. I definitely am an entrepreneur in residence. Yeah, it's so important. But actually, just picking up on that last point, Nicolas and I really share the same views and goals on an awful lot of things. And this open data part of it is just so important that we too have decided to open and launch the Open Data Institute, which is going to be headed up by Sir Tim Berners-Lee and Sir Nigel Shadbolt. And that's going to be in Tech City, which is terrific. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Tech City in a moment. But we really do think that by opening up our data sets and inviting developers to come and give us some ideas about what we can do, what we should do with this data, we can unlock a whole new swathe of wealth and growth that currently we don't have. And also, by collaborating And actually, we want to introduce a new word here. We've decided we're going to embrace this whole new term right across Europe, which is co-opetition. It's no secret that France and the UK have had this friendly rivalry for some time, but we decided to embrace that and call it co-opetition. So we'd like you to share with us in making that a reality. And what that means is that all of the markets that we have available in the UK, we want to make open and available to French entrepreneurs, European entrepreneurs, and international entrepreneurs. And also, I'll talk briefly, we'll talk more about that later, but I'll now talk briefly about, just to draw in a parallel to what France is doing, to what we've done in the UK to really encourage innovation and entrepreneurship. And at the beginning of the year, at the end of last year, the Prime Minister announced the Tech City Initiative, which was really to create to amplify the existing cluster of tech and digital businesses that were growing up in the area just next to the City of London, the financial district, right the way up to Stratford and the Olympic Park, where we're investing about £9 billion as a country in the most extraordinary infrastructure and broadband. So those two areas, if you like, the rough outline area of where Tech City is. But I have forbidden any member of my team to publish a map that shows a border, because we want the success of Tech City to spill over to the rest of the UK and to our European partners as well. So I'm happy to embrace France into Tech City if that helps. Talking about the policy changes, beginning of this year, the government looked at this growth and said, okay, what can we do to, as you said, Sherry, not get in the way? That's the most important thing. And the second thing is, what can we do to stimulate it? And we did 4 major policy changes. The first one was really difficult, but absolutely useful, which was the entrepreneur's visa. And we were so proud that we were actually able to get that in. And what that means is, obviously, for European entrepreneurs, it's not an issue, but for entrepreneurs from outside Europe, which we're both keen to attract, this means that they can come to the UK, set up their business with just £50,000 of investment from a qualifying venture capital investor or an accelerator such as SeedCamp. So that's the entrepreneur's visa was the first policy. The second one was this thing called lifetime capital gains relief for entrepreneurs, which means that the first £10 million of capital gains that they make when they sell the company, they get to keep 90% of it. We will only charge them 10% capital gains tax. That sends a very clear signal, we think, to entrepreneurs that we're keen for them to keep their wealth and recycle the wealth. As you quite rightly pointed out, it's the entrepreneurs that sell their businesses and then reinvest it are the ones that also bring the experience to. The third policy was the R&D tax credit, which means for every £100 you put into doing R&D and developers, you get back £225 in R&D tax credit. I use this in my own business. It was absolutely vital in being able to help us cross the chasm, especially when we ran out of money. It was a terrific little boost. And so the other policy changes that we made, and probably one of the most important one, was on the investor side. And literally last week we announced that wow, what a cool tune. That really means it's over, doesn't it?
It will in about 30 seconds.
For early stage investors, UK taxpayers who are putting money into early stage companies, we've actually increased the tax break that they get right up to 50% against their current year tax bill. And for all investment made in financial year 2012, those investments will be free of capital gains tax. It is a 1-year only slot, and it's designed to prime the pump to encourage early stage investors to enter the market. So that's a brief outline of what we're doing at a policy level.
Yep, thank you. Well, I think that angel investors are going to pour in with that last, the last tax incentive. I think you put in 100,000 and you get back 78,000 in the first year. So I think it creates lots of incentives. One of the so there's a common theme which is data between well, there's a lot of common themes between what both of you are doing. So I think best practice seems to be to being shared, which is good. One of the things that I think in Europe there was a study that showed that we have about the same number of startups, but we've got half the number of scale-ups. So what is it that the government needs to do both to encourage companies and universities and the entrepreneurs themselves to focus on scaling them up? Because it's we all know it's pretty easy to sort of start up a company, although I'm sure some in the audience don't think it's easy to start up a company. But it is much more difficult to get it to grow from, instead of getting it to grow from 1 employee to 10 employees, getting it to grow from 10 to 2,000 over the course of a year or two. We don't have that many companies in Europe that can do that, but we know that to be an engine for the economy, it's focusing on what we can do to get those off, not off the ground, but sailing, so that we can create more Googles and more Facebooks and more companies like that. Can you tell me what programs you have specifically for scale-ups rather than startups? Because I know that startups are brilliant, but what are we going to do to focus on getting more out the door?
Several things. First of all, if you compare Europe to Silicon Valley, there's the question of funding. How much money can you get? So that goes back to my first point about investment. Like, private investor can rely now on public money if they need to leverage public money to actually spend more and invest more in companies, to put bigger dollars, bigger euros in the startups to scale up. Number two, we've been trying to attract larger companies for the whole ecosystem to kind of, see how it works and try to scale up with the big companies and try to, have models like that.
So similar to what you did with Google the other morning.
Exactly. That's why Google invested in France and opened an R&D center, which is only the second one in Europe after Zurich. So that's great news, and that's going to create a whole dynamics, just like Microsoft did 10 years ago, making of Paris its European headquarters. So, that's the second thing. Now, I think the third thing is really about the culture, the mindset, and maybe we have now, we didn't have a few years ago, is everybody wants to go global. And there's a reason for that, and that's great. I think it's a great opportunity, because I share the analysis, but I think there's an opportunity. With the whole shift in the distribution model of new technologies, when you think about platforms like the iPhone App Store, Android, or even Facebook as a platform, you've got a bunch of companies who can go global instantly. And I see French companies competing in that space and being, doing absolutely great. So, if I take like a web service called Sparrow Mail, huge hit on the iPhone. 80% of their customers are in the US, the companies in Paris. It doesn't make a difference. Yep. So I think that's a way, that's an opportunity, and it's the same in social gaming, which have huge companies, Iscool, Kobojo, who do globally from Paris through Facebook. So I think there's an opportunity there, and people are going to learn how to see global and how to do global. We have the talent for that, I'm sure.
And I think the idea of attracting these larger companies in is a really important part of the ecosystem that you need to develop your cluster. And don't let anybody kid you. I know some entrepreneurs are worried that these bigger companies are going to attract some of the best engineers and compete. But actually, in our discussions with some of these larger companies, especially Google, they're very aware that they also need to contribute to the ecosystem just as much as they can benefit from it. And they've just done something, we're really delighted about this, in the same way that they've invested in France. They've also established and just taken a 7-story building in Tech City. This is really interesting, quite a novel thing for them. It's an innovation center where they're actually contributing this to the ecosystem. And saying, what do you want us to do in it? Which is quite amazing. Of course, for us, we want access to Google, which is very cool. And that will be possible there. But it is so nice to see them trying new innovations and models like that, which we're very keen to share ideas and actually ask for ideas of what they should do there. They've asked us to ask for that. So they're important parts of the ecosystem. And we had 12 companies that made a commitment to Tech City, the larger companies, when the Prime Minister made the announcement, including Cisco, who committed over $500 million over a 5-year investment period, which we're delighted. But actually, we've been discussing this, and I'm just conscious of the time. So what we really want to share with you is some of the discussions. Quite an unusual thing this year. You're having, government's having a discussion. We decided to share the discussion with you. Well,
and they're announcing something, again, launching another thing at LeWeb, or at least launching a discussion on LeWeb. So
that's right.
Good.
So here's the thing. I mean, we understand exactly the point that Sherry outlined, which is that the startups are great, but the way you achieve growth in the economy is by helping the scale-ups. So we kind of has together decided what can we do about this. And we've come up with this idea, which we want to share with you and ask for your ideas on, which is something called the global, for now it's a working title, it may be what we stick with, just very simple, the Global Entrepreneurs Network, or GEN for short. And the idea behind GEN is that we're going to start by finding 5 entrepreneurs representing a sector in each city or country or cluster. We'll find 5 from the UK, 5 from Paris or 5 from France, and we'll put them together because it's really interesting because governments naturally tend to kind of compete, but entrepreneurs collaborate. And so what we're trying to do is, although we want to encourage this network of entrepreneurs, what we'd like them to do is establish natural networks where they become champions for each other. So for example, an entrepreneur who received investment in Silicon Valley should be able to look at us in Europe and say, it is more frictionless and effortless to do business there because they've put in place this entrepreneurs network. It's not governments competing, it's an entrepreneurs network. I don't know, what do you think? Do you think it'll work?
That's exactly, I mean, we shared on this, and obviously that's a great idea. Governments compete, entrepreneurs collaborate. The web is an expression of that. So if we can build stronger links, stronger ties, and try to learn together in this structure, I'm sure that can help. It's all about connection. The power now is in the networks. I think governments understand that. They adapt to that. And so the more we can go that way, at least we hope that that's an idea that's going to seduce
So what
everyone.
do we want to ask them? What should we ask you? I mean, what should we do with this global entrepreneurs network? Sherry.
So I think these guys would like some feedback from you on how to create and embellish the global entrepreneurship network. And what we've done, or what Loic has done for us, is he's created a web address which is GEN, which stands for Global Entrepreneur Network, at LeWeb.net. So if you've got suggestions for how we create this network, which will work on the European platform so that we can create global companies from Europe that are world-beating, that's what we're trying to do. And again, cooperation between governments, you know, is quite new, but that's exactly what we're trying to do.
So GEN, right? G-E-N?
G-E-N at leweb.net. So give us your suggestions. The suggestions will go to these guys, and before you know it, when we're at the next LeWeb, we'll start talking about what you guys have created and what we started here.
I think it's incredible that our governments realize how important it is that it's an entire sector of the economy which is growing, and you are here to support the startup scene in Europe. It's incredible. So yeah, we'll talk about it. Let's do a follow-up next year.
Cool.
Yep.
Thank you.
And entrepreneurs, thank you very much again for having us. It's really important.
Thank you, both of you, for supporting the startup scene, and Sherry for organizing this for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To our governments in Europe.